When I was a kid, I used to think the world was split cleanly between fair and unfair. That if you worked hard, you earned your place. That if you were kind, it came back around. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for how wrong I was. Until the night my daughter got shoved to the side of a stage by her own aunt. My name's Nate. I'm 39. Single dad, engineer by trade, full-time coffee addict, and, more recently, unofficial event planner for a growing orchestra that my daughter plays violin in. Her name's Lila. She's 15, and I know every parent thinks their kid is special, but Lila, she's the kind of kid who shows up early to help clean up after school events no one else volunteers for. The kind who doesn't talk much in big groups, but makes the shy kid feel like they belong. She's smart, but not obsessed with grades. Kind, but not soft. Quiet, but not weak. I don't say this lightly. Lila's my hero. Especially after this past year. My mom, Lila's grandma, had major spinal surgery last fall. It wrecked her mobility. She couldn't walk, cook, bathe herself. Insurance covered some help, but not enough. And I was working overtime at the time to cover rising mortgage payments and hospital bills. That's when Lila stepped up in a way number 15-year-old should have to. She gave up violin club. She gave up her part-time job at the cafe. She'd come straight home after school, make soup, help grandma to the bathroom, take calls from the visiting nurse when I was stuck at work. Never once complained. Never once asked for a reward. Meanwhile, my sister Heather, older than me by 4 years and exactly 4 times louder, was busy bragging about her kids' GPA scores on every social media app she could log into. Don't get me wrong, her twins, Emily and Kate, are smart girls. Always top of their class, captain of every club, teacher's favorites. And Heather's made sure the world knows it. She's the kind of mom who prints out the honor roll to frame it above the fireplace. She's also the kind who believes academic achievement trumps everything, including character. If you're not getting straight A's, in her eyes, you're wasting your time. We've always had tension between us, even growing up. I was the quiet one, the one who liked to build things in the garage and hated the spotlight. Heather was the performer, the praise-hungry golden child who thrived on applause. And now that we're adults, nothing's really changed, except now she uses her kids to chase the spotlight instead of hogging it herself. Still, I tried to keep the peace for the sake of our mom, for the sake of the family. But there's only so many subtle digs you can take before something breaks. It started with something small. It always does. There was a music showcase being planned at the community theater downtown. It's a big deal. One of those local events where all the school orchestras come together for one night. Lila had been practicing for weeks. She even wrote a piece for the strings ensemble. It wasn't some showboaty solo. It was meant to highlight the full section, including kids who didn't usually get much attention. Classic Lila. The program even listed her as a student composer. I could tell how much it meant to her. Not because she said anything, but because she was humming her part under her breath during dinner, and she triple-checked the date on our shared Google Calendar. That's how I knew. The day tickets went live, I logged in the minute they dropped and snagged front row seats. 4 of them. 1 for me, 1 for my mom, who was finally able to sit upright for longer than 30 minutes, and 2 more, just in case. I didn't even know who I'd invite. Maybe one of Lila's friends. Maybe her music teacher. Honestly, I just wanted her to have someone cheering loud in the front row. She deserved that. I didn't tell anyone in the family about the tickets. I didn't think I had to. But then, 2 days before the show, I got a call from Heather. Not a hi, how are you kind of call. A straight to the point, no pleasantries, I'm already irritated kind of call. Hey Nate, I'm just making sure you got tickets for mom. I did, I said, stirring soup on the stove. Front row. There was a pause. Oh, you got front row? Yeah, I said slowly. Figured mom would appreciate being close, since her eyesight's not great these days. Another pause. I could practically hear her calculating something. And, did you get any for the rest of the family? I hesitated. Just 4 total. Me, mom, and 2 extras. What? Well, she said, her voice sharpening. You do realize Emily and Kate are performing too, right? They made principal violin and cello. Front row would mean a lot to them. I blinked. I didn't know that, but congrats to them. That's great. Right, she said quickly. So I assume you're willing to give up those front row seats? I mean, no offense, but Lila's just part of the ensemble. Not even a soloist. I let that sit for a beat. Just long enough to feel the burn behind my eyes. She composed one of the pieces, I said. She's been helping Mom recover for 6 months. I figured she earned it. Heather scoffed. Helping around the house isn't the same as being academically excellent. My girls have maintained perfect grades, Nate. Straight A's. Principal chairs. That's not easy. And you know how much they've sacrificed. They've earned the spotlight. I wanted to hang up. I almost did. But instead, I said, I already bought the seats, Heather. There was silence. Then, stiffly, fine. Just don't expect the rest of the family to sit behind some ensemble player. Click. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I looked over at Lila, who was sitting at the kitchen table, helping Grandma adjust the Velcro on her wrist brace while reading a book on her lap. She looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. I didn't tell her about the call. The next day, Heather posted a status on Facebook. So proud of my girls earning principal positions. Can't wait to watch them shine from the front row. And just like that, I knew she wasn't going to let it go. She wanted to fight. She wanted the spotlight. And she didn't care who she shoved out of the way to get it. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't planning to sit down and let it happen this time. Not when it came to Lila. And especially not when I saw what she did the night of the show. But I'll get to that. Because before the spotlight hit, the drama started in the parking lot, and it only got worse from there. I didn't sleep much the night after Heather's call. It wasn't just the conversation. It was everything packed into it. The implication that Lila wasn't good enough, that helping her grandmother wasn't an accomplishment worth recognition, that musical creativity meant less than a report card. I kept thinking about how casually Heather said it, as if it was just obvious. Her kids deserve the front row. Lila, background music. The next morning over breakfast, Lila was her usual quiet self. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and her hair pulled up in a lopsided ponytail. She looked up from her cereal and asked, "Do you think Grandma will be okay sitting that long?" "Yeah," I said. "I talked to her physical therapist. We'll bring one of the portable cushions for her back." Lila nodded, took a bite, and said, "Thanks for getting those seats." I paused. "You knew?" She smirked a little. "Grandma told me." She was excited. I smiled and reached across the table to ruffle her hair, but she ducked away with a playful glare. That was our rhythm. Quiet appreciation, small gestures. I didn't realize until much later how rare that dynamic was in our family. The morning of the concert, the group chat lit up like a Christmas tree. Heather, 8:02 a.m. Hey fam. Make sure to get there early. Heard the front row is gonna be tight, huh? Cousin Jenny, 8:07 a.m. Looking forward to seeing the girls shine. Aunt Mira, 8:12 a.m. Can't wait. Emily and Kate have been working so hard. No mention of Lila. Not even a generic, proud of all the kids message. I considered typing something. A gentle reminder that my daughter existed. That she had written one of the ensemble's original pieces and had been practicing after midnight most nights while still taking care of our mom. But I didn't. It wasn't worth it. Not in that chat. Not when I knew Heather would twist anything I said into a guilt trip or a lecture. By noon, I was on edge. That's when I got the email from the event coordinator. It was short. "Hi Nate. Just confirming your front row reservation of 4 seats. Quick note. Another parent has requested to purchase them from you in exchange for 6 general admission seats, plus a small donation to the school's music program. Let me know what you prefer." I stared at the screen. My pulse kicked up. I didn't need to ask who the other parent was. The timing, the phrasing, it was Heather's playbook, always dressed up in something charitable. I responded immediately. "Thanks for reaching out. I'll be keeping the seats. We're very excited to support Lila from the front row. Appreciate you checking in." It took everything in me to not add more. Not to type out what I really thought. I just closed the laptop and walked into the living room, where Lila was tuning her violin and humming under her breath. That night, we dressed up a little. Nothing flashy, just enough to make it feel like something special. I wore the same blazer I wore to Lila's last school ceremony. Lila wore her favorite gray dress, the one with the embroidered vines down the side that made her look way older than 15 in the scariest and most beautiful way possible. When we got to the venue, it was buzzing. Parents clustered near the entrance, camera flashes blinking like fireflies, conversations rising and falling in 100 separate bubbles. I saw Heather before she saw us. She was standing near the lobby entrance with her husband and the twins, wearing a pearl blazer like she was walking a red carpet. Emily and Kate were dressed to match. Hair curled, lips glossed, matching charm bracelets. And I couldn't help but notice the way Heather stood slightly ahead of them, waving at every person who glanced her way like she was the one being honored. We walked past without stopping. Inside, the front row was roped off with gold sashes. I handed the usher our tickets, and he smiled. "Ah, the composer's family," he said. "You're early. Good seats." Lila smiled, but it was small. She looked both proud and nervous. We took our seats. Me, Lila, my mom, and one empty chair. I had texted Lila's music teacher that morning and offered it to her, but she hadn't confirmed. I figured it would go unused. 10 minutes before the show began, Heather arrived. She walked in like she owned the place, marched straight toward the front row, and stopped cold when she saw us already sitting. The look on her face was pure disbelief, like someone had told her the stage was being moved and she didn't get the memo. Heather leaned over the rope and said, just loud enough for us to hear, "Excuse me, you're in our seats." The usher, bless his heart, stepped in before I could respond. "Actually, ma'am, these seats are reserved. The gentleman here booked them weeks ago." Heather blinked. "I know he did. That's the problem." The usher looked confused. "I'm sorry." Heather smiled sweetly at him, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just that my daughters are principal violin and cello tonight. It's important they see some familiar faces in the front row. You understand, right?" I stood up. "Back off, Heather," I said quietly. She turned to me, her smile dropping. "Nate, don't be petty. You've made your point. But it's not about you. It's about what's fair. Emily and Kate are very talented." I cut in. "But so is Lila. And she's sitting right here. Maybe instead of trying to shove her out of the spotlight, you could try supporting her." Heather's face hardened. "You've always been jealous of my girls. Admit it." I stared at her. "No, I've just always been tired of pretending that you're not exhausting." That earned a small snort from my mom beside me. Heather turned beet red. Before she could say anything else, the lights dimmed and the MC took the stage. The music began. Lila's ensemble was third on the program. As they walked out, she looked small on stage, but I knew better. I knew how many hours she'd put into this. I knew she'd helped rewrite the cello part to match a new tempo when one of the younger kids couldn't keep up. I knew she'd sat with Grandma during physical therapy, icing her knees while reading sheet music under a dim hallway light. She stood tall and proud, violin tucked under her chin. When her piece began, it didn't open with fanfare. It started soft, tentative, like a memory forming in the dark. Then it grew, layering into something rich and strong. I saw heads tilt. People sat forward in their chairs. It was good. It was really good. When the piece ended, there was a beat of silence, like everyone needed a second to breathe again. Then thunderous applause. My mom wiped at her eyes. I stood and clapped so hard my palms stung. And that's when it happened. As the kids began exiting the stage, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned. It was Heather. She leaned in, voice like a knife. "Your daughter didn't deserve front row seats." I froze. "She's not the one who's been working her butt off for years to be at the top," she went on, eyes flicking to the stage where her girls were prepping backstage. "Emily and Kate are going to college for this. Lila, this is just a hobby. Don't pretend otherwise." I stared at her. My ears were ringing. I couldn't believe she had the gall to say that now, after what we'd just witnessed. But I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled. "You're right," I said softly. Heather blinked. Then I walked out into the lobby and made a phone call. Because I hadn't told her the full story. I hadn't told anyone what I'd really done when I booked those tickets. And in 10 minutes, she was going to learn exactly what kind of hobby Lila had turned into. I wish I could say I was calm when I stepped into the lobby, but that would be a lie. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, exactly, but from that specific cocktail of emotions you only get when someone belittles your child in public, in front of family, after she's poured every ounce of her time and heart into something beautiful. Heather's words echoed in my head. Your daughter didn't deserve front row seats. Not didn't earn them. Didn't deserve them. There's a difference. And Heather knew exactly what she was saying. I pulled out my phone, took a breath, and made the call. Hey, it's Nate Jacobs, I said, walking down the side hallway away from the crowd. Just confirming we're still good for the second part? The voice on the other end chuckled. Of course. Everything's on schedule. She has no idea? None. I said, my throat tight. She's going to love it. I smiled despite everything. Thanks again. I'll be back in my seat in a minute. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit. I stood there for a moment, letting my heart settle, before turning back toward the theater doors. But as I reached for the handle, I heard a voice. Heather's. She was around the corner, just past the women's restroom, whispering sharply into her phone. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. They let her daughter compose something, but they didn't even offer mine a solo. It's all politics. Her little ensemble piece isn't going to matter when my girls get scholarships. And did you see how she was dressed? Like she got dropped off from a thrift store. I stopped cold. I know I shouldn't have listened, but I did. Every word. If Nate weren't such a martyr, maybe he'd realize he's holding her back. She could have been great with the right parents pushing her. That one knocked the wind out of me. I stepped back, breath catching, a wave of shame I didn't expect washing over me. Was I holding Lila back? Had I done something wrong? Should I have forced her into more lessons, more clubs, more competitions? I'd always let her set the pace. Maybe that was a mistake. I turned and walked back to my seat without a word. My mom must have seen something in my face because she squeezed my arm when I sat down, but she didn't ask. The concert continued, but I barely heard the rest of it. All I could think about was that whisper. With the right parents, she could have been great. When the lights came up, I stood and clapped automatically, barely noticing the bows and the closing speech. Lila was smiling shyly at the applause, her cheeks pink. I clapped harder. My mom stood beside me, beaming with pride. But there was a knot in my chest I couldn't untangle. After the show, the theater spilled into the lobby again, filled with proud parents and kids in black dresses and slacks. Heather was already holding court near the refreshment table, flanked by Emily and Kate, accepting congratulations like it was her name on the program. When Lila emerged from backstage, she made a beeline for us. I hugged her tighter than I probably should have. You were incredible, I said. Truly. Thanks, she said softly. I messed up one of the notes in the bridge. No one noticed, my mom said firmly, wrapping an arm around her. It was beautiful. Before I could say more, Heather appeared beside us, sipping from a paper cup and smiling tightly. Well, she said, that was a lovely performance. Thanks, Lila said politely. You know, Heather continued, Emily and Kate are doing a workshop next weekend for pre-college additions. I could ask if there's still room. Not sure how much help it'd be at your level, but... Lila blinked. Thanks, but I'm not auditioning for college yet. Heather smiled. Right? Of course. I just thought it might give you some structure. You know, real music training. My mom shifted beside me. I clenched my jaw. Lila just nodded. Okay. That was it. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just stood there, shrinking an inch with every word. I hadn't seen her like that in months. Not since those first few weeks after Grandma's surgery, when she barely slept and cried in the bathroom with the door locked. Not since she gave up her part-time job and tried to study for math tests while timing our mom's meds. And it hit me all over again. How easy it was for Heather to steamroll over people. To make someone feel like they were smaller for not chasing the same shiny prizes her girls did. Even when they were already carrying twice the weight. I didn't say anything then. Not yet. But I knew. That was the moment. That was the fall. That was when something shifted inside me. Because for the first time, I wasn't just angry at Heather. I was angry at myself. Not for being less ambitious. Not for not forcing Lila into programs she didn't want. Not for giving her space to breathe. But for not shielding her more. For letting her be exposed to people like Heather without enough armor. For not doing more to make sure she knew exactly how proud I was of the person she was growing into. That was the night I realized I had to stop trying to keep the peace. Because peace with people who belittle your kid isn't peace at all. The next few days passed quietly. Lila didn't bring up Heather's comment. Neither did I. But something was different. She was quieter. Not sad, just flat. She didn't hum around the house like she used to. Didn't pull out her violin in the evenings. She went to school, came home, did her homework, helped Grandma, and went to bed. I asked her one night if she wanted to go out for ice cream. Just us. She smiled and said she was tired. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I'd been putting it off for weeks. Mostly because I didn't want to pressure her, but now it felt important. There was a music mentorship program I'd heard about months ago through a friend in my engineering circle. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't about competition or scholarships. It was about composition. Real composition. Pairing young musicians with working professionals, film scorers, game music producers, even Broadway arrangers, to help them develop their own voice. Not to win trophies. To create. I reached out to the contact that night. We exchanged a few emails. I sent over a clip of Lila's performance, the one I'd secretly recorded from my phone. They responded in 2 days. She's got a unique touch. Tell her if she's interested. There's a seat for her in the spring cohort. Fully funded. I almost cried. When I told Lila, she didn't react at first. Just stared at the email. You don't have to say yes, I added quickly. But they heard your piece. They liked it. And they want to help you keep writing. No pressure. She blinked a few times. Then looked up at me. Are you serious? As a heart attack. She smiled, slowly, at first. Then wider. And just like that, the light came back into her eyes. That weekend, she started writing again. She brought her violin back into the living room and started scribbling little notes on sheet paper, testing melodies, humming fragments of ideas into her phone. She wasn't trying to be the best. She wasn't trying to beat anyone. She was just creating. And for the first time in weeks, she looked alive. And me? I started rebuilding too. I deleted the family group chat. I blocked Heather from messaging me. I took my mom out to lunch, just us, and told her everything. About the conversation I overheard. About the way Heather had tried to buy the front row seats. About the mentorship offer. About how I wanted to do more. Be more. Not just for Lila, but for myself. You're already more than enough, my mom said, gripping my hand across the table. But if this is about finally setting boundaries, then good. It's time. I nodded. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was reclaiming something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. That feeling stayed with me all week. Right up until the night of the orchestra fundraiser. The one Heather planned. The one where everything changed again. Because I showed up with Lila, quiet, smiling, composed, and Heather had no idea what was coming. It's funny how you can spend years tolerating someone, dodging their insults, letting things slide, biting your tongue for the sake of peace. And then, in one moment, all of that patience calcifies into something sharper, something colder, something that doesn't care about peace anymore. For me, that moment had already passed. By the time the orchestra fundraiser rolled around, I was no longer interested in just defending Lila. I wanted to make a point, not by yelling, not by throwing punches, but by building something so undeniable, so public, that even Heather couldn't pretend it didn't exist. And the best part? I didn't have to lie, exaggerate, or manipulate a single thing. All I had to do was shine a light on what had already been there the whole time. Lila's kindness, her effort, her quiet brilliance. I just needed the right stage. And wouldn't you know it, Heather handed me one. She was the lead organizer of the spring fundraiser for the district orchestra program. It was a black tie event at the country club where she and her husband held their annual holiday party. Tickets were $150 a head, with proceeds going toward new instruments, sheet music, and travel costs for out-of-state competitions. Every family was expected to contribute, either by buying a table, donating auction items, or helping coordinate the event. Heather, of course, took the reins like she was running a Senate campaign. She created a color-coded spreadsheet with donation goals and assignments. She delegated auction item outreach to less busy parents. She even assigned roles to the students, most of whom had no idea they were about to be paraded around like decorative centerpieces. Lila, naturally, was put in charge of coat check. When she told me, I laughed. Not at her, but at the predictability of it all. She said I'd be best suited for something low pressure. Lila said with a shrug. Did she? I said. Lila nodded, then went back to her sandwich. But I wasn't laughing later that night when Heather called me out of the blue. Hi, Nate, she said, syrupy sweet. Quick favor to ask. What's up? We had a cancellation for one of the donor performances. Just a 5-minute spotlight. Would you be able to convince Lila to play something? Nothing flashy, just background music. You know, while people arrive. I paused. You want her to perform, but also work coat check. Heather laughed lightly. Well, she can play for 10 minutes, then head to her station. We're on a tight schedule. I could hear the strain in her voice. She didn't want to ask. She didn't even like asking. But someone must have dropped out and left her in a bind. And the fact that she turned to Lila, of all people, must have stung. I smiled. Sure, we'll be there. What I didn't tell her was that Lila wouldn't just be playing a 5-minute background melody. Because while Heather had been busy assigning my daughter to coat check duty, I'd been busy too. I'd met with the mentorship program director, the one who'd seen Lila's composition. We talked about her work, about her potential, and about a special opportunity they had coming up, a collaborative showcase. Each student would be paired with a working composer to co-create a short piece to be performed live at a professional venue. No competitions, just creation, real performance. With one condition, the student had to submit a full draft of their original work by mid-April. That gave us 3 weeks. So every night, after homework and dinner and helping Grandma, Lila and I worked on it. She wrote the melodies. I offered feedback, only when asked. We played sample recordings. She tested harmonies. She even reached out to a local music teacher she admired and asked for input, which, for her, was a huge deal. And slowly, this piece started forming, haunting and beautiful and full of moments that felt like memory. She titled it Quiet Hours. I couldn't think of anything more fitting. So when Heather called about the fundraiser, I saw it immediately, the setup, the perfect moment. Heather wanted Lila to be background noise. I was going to make her the centerpiece. I called the mentorship program director again. I asked if there was any chance they had someone in the area who might be free to accompany Lila live. She said, "Give me a few days." 2 days later, I got a call from a man named Simon, late 30s, jazz pianist, soundtrack composer for indie films. He lived one town over. He'd heard Lila's recording. He was in. Next, I called the event coordinator at the country club. Not Heather, the coordinator. A woman named Elise, mid-40s, very professional. I explained that Lila would be performing with a special guest accompanist and needed a small adjustment in timing. Just 10 minutes, uninterrupted, before coat check. Elise was thrilled. That'll be perfect. The mayor's arriving around then. Great timing for something memorable. I didn't bother telling Heather. Let her be surprised. Lila knew, of course. She practiced with Simon twice before the event. She was nervous, but focused. And I kept my promise. I didn't push. I didn't hover. I just helped her polish the shoes she wanted to wear, printed her sheet music in triplicate, and made sure the violin was tuned to perfection. The night of the fundraiser arrived crisp and cold. Lila wore a dark green dress with subtle embroidery at the sleeves. Her hair was half up, half down. She looked elegant, but not showy. Confident, but grounded. I dropped her off at the performer's entrance, where Simon was already waiting. She gave me a small nod before heading inside. Meanwhile, I parked out front and walked through the main entrance, where the lobby was already buzzing. The silent auction tables were set up, and staff were arranging appetizers on polished trays. Heather was near the bar, clipboard in hand, speaking in a tight whisper to a group of parents who looked like they'd been roped into unpaid labor. When she saw me, she did a double take. "You're early," she said, surprised. "Wanted to get a good seat." I replied evenly. She looked confused for a second, then brushed it off. "Well, there's a little change in the program. Lila will play a short welcome piece in about 10 minutes. Just something light before she heads to coat check." I nodded. "Should be great." Heather raised an eyebrow at my calm. She didn't ask more. She was too busy running the room. The main hall was set like a wedding. Round tables, candles, a small stage at the front with a baby grand piano. There was a printed program on each table. I picked one up. Opening performance, Quiet Hours, violin, Lila Jacobs piano, Simon Royce. Right beneath that, welcome speech, Heather Collins. I smiled. The room began to fill. Families arrived in clusters. Parents in suits and cocktail dresses. A few teachers I recognized. The superintendent. The mayor. And sitting at the head table, of course, Heather. At exactly 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. A soft spotlight illuminated the stage. Simon stepped onto the stage first, followed by Lila, who carried her violin like it belonged in her hands. The crowd murmured politely. Then the music began. It didn't start loud. It unfolded slowly, like something forgotten rising to the surface. The piano was subtle, layered underneath Lila's melody like a heartbeat. The violin line wove in and out of quiet harmony, pausing in places that felt like breath, like memory. And the room froze. People stopped mid-sip, mid-whisper. The chatter disappeared. Even Heather sat completely still. It was undeniable. This wasn't background music. It wasn't filler. It was a moment. When it ended, there was a long silence. Then applause, real, thunderous applause that filled the room. Some people even stood, not because they were told to, but because they couldn't help it. I didn't look at Heather. I didn't need to. I already knew what her face looked like. But the best part was still to come. Because just as Lila bowed and began to leave the stage, the lights shifted again, and Elise, the coordinator, took the mic. "I'd like to thank Lila Jacobs and Simon Royce for that breathtaking performance," she said. "And on behalf of the district, I'm proud to announce that Lila has been accepted into the Young Composers Mentorship Program for Spring 2026. She'll be working directly with professional musicians to continue developing her original work. Let's give her another round of applause." The room erupted. Lila froze mid-step. I saw her eyes widen. She looked toward me in the back. I smiled and nodded. And in that moment, everything shifted. Not just the room, not just the fundraiser, the entire dynamic. Heather had built the stage, but Lila owned it now. The applause hadn't even died down before the whispers began. By the time Lila stepped off the stage, the tide had shifted completely. The fundraiser had only just started, and already the star of the night had been decided. And it wasn't Heather, or her high-achieving twins, or the polished auction baskets she'd spent a month micromanaging. It was my daughter, not because she shouted the loudest, not because she had the highest GPA or the fanciest resume, but because her music moved people, quietly, fully, without begging for attention, and everyone in the room felt it. Heather, for once, had nothing to say. She approached Lila briefly near the back, offering a polite, brittle smile that barely masked the heat in her cheeks. I was a few steps behind and caught just enough of the exchange. "That was unexpected," she said, clutching her wine glass like it might leap from her hand. "Thank you," Lila said simply. Heather glanced over Lila's shoulder toward the head table, where a cluster of parents were now pointing and whispering. Not about her twins, but about Lila. A few looked up her name in the printed program, one already taking a photo of the composer line with her phone. Heather tried to recover. "Well, coat check's still a bit short-handed. If you're done performing, I'm sure they could use you." Lila paused. Then, calmly, she said, "I'm actually going to stay with the musicians. Simon said I could shadow him during the second set." Heather's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She couldn't, not with people watching. And they were watching. Because what she didn't realize yet, what none of them did, was that the showcase performance hadn't just upstaged her carefully orchestrated agenda. It had rewritten the program entirely. The rest of the evening moved in a blur. People kept approaching me. Strangers, teachers, district reps. Even the mayor's wife came over to say how deeply affecting the piece was. I heard words like precocious, original voice, and natural composer float through the air like praise balloons. But I wasn't smiling for them. I was smiling because I saw Lila, flushed, surprised, unsure of what to do with all the compliments, but standing tall through all of it. She was finding her footing not by performing, but by being recognized for the right things, not just talent, but effort, heart, vision. The best part? She didn't let it change her. She thanked people, smiled gently, and slipped off to sit quietly with Simon and another musician, listening to their notes like it was a regular night. Because for her, it wasn't about being better than anyone. It was about making something that mattered. I didn't tell her the rest until the following week. When the fundraiser concluded and the online recap went up on the school's website, Heather made one last attempt to reclaim the spotlight. She wrote a 3-paragraph piece congratulating the orchestra, highlighting the twins' hard work, and thanking herself, in third person, for organizing a seamless and impactful night of generosity and talent. But the comments told a different story. Out of 42 public replies, over 30 mentioned Lila by name. A few asked if her piece was available online. One parent even suggested creating a special student spotlight in future fundraisers for original works. The tone was clear. The night didn't belong to Heather. It belonged to the girl she tried to shove behind a coat rack. But the real fallout came later. 2 weeks after the fundraiser, I got a call from Elise, the same event coordinator from the country club. She wanted to let me know about something delicate. Apparently, Heather had submitted a proposal to chair next year's fundraiser as well. And while her contributions were appreciated, Elise said the board had chosen to go a different direction. They wanted someone who could bring more creative vision and student-centered storytelling. And guess who they picked? Me. Not because I campaigned for it. I didn't even apply. But enough parents, moved by Lila's performance and the authenticity behind it, had suggested my name that the board reached out to me. I asked Lila before accepting. "I don't want to make it a power thing," I told her. "But I also want to make sure it's a space for kids like you, who aren't chasing gold stars, but who care, really care." She looked up from her notebook, She was sketching cover art for her next composition and said, "Do it." So I said yes. And that's when the cracks in Heather's carefully crafted empire began to show. I didn't go out of my way to embarrass her. That's the thing about revenge done right. It doesn't need spectacle. It just needs to let truth rise, quietly, until the people clinging to the illusion have nothing left to hold. I didn't take away her friends. She did that herself, slowly, as more parents started pulling away from her constant competitiveness. When she tried to start a group chat for next year's fundraiser, only 2 people joined, and one of them muted the conversation immediately. I didn't sabotage her twins. They're good kids. A little absorbed, maybe, but not cruel like their mom. They kept their heads down. And when the mentorship program director announced the upcoming open call for next year's applicants, guess who asked me? Me. If I'd review their portfolios before submission. "Emily," she said, "you're the only one who seems to actually care about the music more than the score sheets." I told her I'd be honored. Heather, of course, wasn't thrilled. But by then, she'd lost her grip on the narrative. Because the truth was out. And not just about Lila. About all of it. About how Heather ran things for attention. How she played the long game of social dominance, dressed up as community service. How she couldn't stand it when someone else earned praise without asking for it. And perhaps most damning of all, people noticed how unshaken Lila was by the noise. How she didn't chase praise. How she just did the work. How she let her music speak without apology. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. Months passed. Lila's mentorship program began in earnest. She traveled every other weekend to work with a composer who specialized in scoring documentaries. She started keeping a journal, not about feelings, but about sounds. She wrote things like, "The way rain hits concrete equals cello," and "Grandma's cane equals sharp staccato footnote." I framed one of her early drafts. It hangs in my home office now, next to a quiet little plaque from the fundraiser board thanking me for creating space for quiet brilliance. As for Heather, well, we don't talk much anymore. It's not dramatic. There was no screaming match, no blowout, just silence. A silence she created when she realized she couldn't control the room anymore. She still sends the occasional mass text around holidays. I respond when I have to. Polite, distant. And she stopped bringing up the front row. Stopped bringing up earning things. Stopped pretending that power comes from pushing others down. Because somewhere deep down, she knows what everyone else saw that night. You can't bury light forever. Especially not the kind that doesn't beg to be seen. The kind that simply shines. And for the first time in years, I'm no longer standing behind anyone. I'm standing next to someone. My daughter. My hero. Final line. She didn't just earn the spotlight. She rewrote the stage.